Welcome to Crown of the Alpha, where every throne is taken by force and every crown comes with a curse. If you are new here, subscribe now and turn on notifications so you never miss a King Ozrath story. Drop a comment below and let me know what you think. Now, let us begin. The Great Hall of Blackmoon Castle has never been this quiet. Not the quiet of peace. Not the quiet of an evening winding down or a crowd at rest. This is the quiet of 200 wolves who have stopped breathing at the same moment, because the most dangerous predator on this continent has just turned his full attention onto a girl who has absolutely no business receiving it. Kira Vash does not move. She stands 10 feet from King Ozrath with a silver serving tray trembling in her hands, and she is looking up at him the way a person looks at something they cannot outrun. Every nerve in her body is screaming at her to lower her eyes, to step back, to become the invisible thing she has spent 4 years training herself to be inside these castle walls. But she cannot look away. Not tonight. Not with what she knows folded inside the lining of her left sleeve. Written in ink so precise and legal it cannot be misread by anyone who understands pact contract law. Almost no one in this room understands pact contract law. Kira does. Ozrath is not supposed to be standing here. He is supposed to be at the signing table 20 feet away, where the Blackmoon Treaty waits beneath the weight of 11 territorial seals. The quill has already been handed to the first alpha. The ceremony is moving. The room is watching the table. Not the east corridor. Not the servant girl frozen near the stone archway. Not the king who has stopped mid-stride and turned with the slow, deliberate precision of a wolf who has caught something in the air that does not belong. His eyes are the color of a winter storm. Cold, completely unreadable, and their locked Kira throws gold light across one side of his face and leaves the other in absolute shadow. The dark crown on his head catches the flame and holds it. Every scar along his jaw is visible. The old ones, the deep ones, the ones that tell the story of a boy who became a king through survival, not ceremony. He looks exactly like every story she was ever told about him before she set foot in Blackmoon Territory. Ruthless, immovable, built from something harder than grief. But he is not looking at her with contempt. He is looking at her like she is a language he almost recognizes. She has 3 minutes before the treaty is permanently sealed. Kira's fingers tighten around the tray. Her left sleeve feels heavier than it has in 3 days. She has rehearsed this moment in the dark of the kitchen dormitory every night since she read page 14, and she has never once imagined it feeling like this. Like standing at the edge of something with no bottom while the most feared alpha alive looks at her, as though she is the most interesting problem in a room full of kings. She reaches into her sleeve. She places the folded index on the silver tray between them. Her voice, when it comes, is quieter than she intends, but does not shake. Your Majesty, the formal address, eyes lowered by exactly the degree pact law requires. I know what I am. I know what this cost me. Page 14. Before the seal. Behind Ozrath, the quill touches the first signature line. Ozrath does not look at the paper immediately. He looks at her. Then he reaches out and takes the index from the tray. From the far end of the hall, half hidden behind the wall of territorial delegates, a man named David Crow watches the exchange without expression. His hand moves slowly to the interior pocket of his formal coat. His fingers close around something inside it. Kira has not yet seen him watch. 200 wolves stand exactly where they were 30 seconds ago, and the silence has changed quality. It has moved from suspended to loaded, the way air changes before lightning finds the ground. Every eye in the room has registered what just happened. A servant girl, a silver tray, a folded document placed before the Alpha King of the Blackmoon Territory in the middle of the Blackmoon Summit. Pact law does not require interpretation on this point. An unmated Omega female addressed the Alpha King directly. The consequence is exile. It has always been exile. The law is older than half the bloodlines represented in this hall tonight, and it has never once been applied with exceptions. Kira knows this. She knew it 3 days ago when she read page 14 for the first time. She knew it last night when she lay in the kitchen dormitory listening to the castle settle around her and made the calculation one final time. She is not standing here because she forgot the law. She is standing here because she decided the law was the smaller cost. Ozrath has not moved. He is holding the closed annex in one hand, and he is completely, utterly still. The specific stillness of a predator who has received information that requires the entire processing capacity of a mind built for war. His council is watching him. The delegate alphas are watching him. The Ashfin pack flags hang motionless over his left shoulder. The Duskwall contingent stands in a tight cluster near the second archway, their Alpha Sarah Vane at the front, her eyes moving between Ozrath and the document in his hand with an expression of controlled, precise attention. Ozrath opens the annex. He reads the first line of page 14. He goes completely still in a different way. Not the stillness of processing, but the stillness of a man who has just felt the temperature of the room change inside his own chest. Kira watches his jaw tighten by a fraction.
Movement.
That is just that fraction.
No sound.
The only external evidence of whatever page 14 is doing to the most controlled alpha alive. He closes the annex. He turns toward the council table without looking at Kira again. She cannot tell if she has just saved thousands of wolves or handed her own exile warrant to the most powerful alpha on the continent. Both feel equally possible. Both feel equally terrifying. 4 years of invisible survival dismantled in 60 seconds, and she is standing in the center of it with an empty tray and no way to know which direction this falls. The other servants have already moved away from her. The social quarantine of someone who has broken pack law is not enforced. It is instinctive. Nobody wants proximity to the consequence. Kira is standing in a radius of empty floor that did not exist 2 minutes ago, and the distance between her and the nearest warm body feels like its own kind of verdict. 2 castle guards appear at the south entrance of the Great Hall. They are not moving toward the signing table. They're moving toward Kira, and they're not looking at her face. They're looking at her hands. David Crow moves through the crowd the way water moves through stone, not forcing, not hurrying, simply finding the path of least resistance until he arrives exactly where he intended to be all along. He's not a large man. That is the first thing people notice and then immediately forget because everything else about him overrides it. He is 51 years old with close-cropped silver hair and the kind of face that has spent decades perfecting the art of revealing nothing. He has served the Blackmoon throne for 11 years. He has survived 4 different council reshuffles, 2 territorial wars, and 1 Alpha King who rewrote every rule of governance the night his mate died in a Highland storm. David Crow survived all of it by being the most useful person in every room he entered. He is moving toward the council table. His eyes have not left Kira since the moment she placed the document on the tray. The delegates part for him without being asked. Not because they know exactly who he is. Most of the visiting alphas know him only as a senior Blackmoon Council figure, but because the body understands authority even when the mind has not yet named it. There is something in the way Crow occupies space that makes other wolves step aside the way smaller currents yield to deeper ones. He reaches the council table. He does not sit. He leans close to the senior council elder, a broad-shouldered man named Aldrich Voss whose family has held the chief elder position for 3 generations, and he speaks quietly. For words, his lips barely move. His expression does not change. Aldrich Voss's face drains of color. It happens completely and immediately, the way color leaves a face when the mind receives information the body was not prepared for. Voss looks up. His eyes move across the hall and find Kira standing alone in her radius of empty floor. Then his eyes move to the exit doors, then back to Crow. He nods once. Crow straightens. He does not acknowledge the nod beyond a slight settling of his shoulders, the adjustment of a man whose calculation has been confirmed. He turns back toward the hall, and his gaze finds Kira again with the specific quality of attention that means he has been tracking her position continuously, and the brief exchange with Voss was conducted without losing her once. Kira feels it before she understands it. The prickling at the back of her neck is different from what she felt when Ozrath turned around. That had been something ancient and biological and outside the architecture of fear. This is fear. clean and clear and specific. The recognition of a threat that has shape and intention and has clearly been operational for longer than the last 60 seconds. She knows only that he is looking at her the way someone looks at a problem they have already solved. Across the hall, Ozrath stands at the council table with the closed index flat on the surface directly in front of his chair. He has not opened it again. He has not dismissed it. Its position is deliberate, centered, visible, unignorable. But what it means inside the architecture of his decision, Kira cannot read from here. The two guards have reached the edge of her empty radius. They stop 2 feet from her. The senior guard, a wolf named Brennan, broad and expressionless, wearing the black and silver of the Blackmoon royal detail, looks at her with the particular blankness of someone performing a function rather than making a choice. He opens his mouth to begin the formal exile declaration. And from across the hall, David Crow watches with the patience of someone who built the room they're standing in and knows exactly how every exit works. Brennan does not finish the first sentence of the exile declaration. Not because anyone stops him, because Kira stops hearing him. It happens the moment the Ashfin Pack flags shift in the draft from the south entrance doors opening. A slow lateral movement of deep green and gold fabric that catches the torchlight at an angle that produces a specific quality of warm, flickering light against dark stone. Her eyes go to the flags without her permission. Her body registers something her mind has not yet named, and for 3 full seconds, she is not standing in the great hall of Blackmoon Castle at all. She is standing in the Greymore settlement on a night 4 years ago when the fires were still producing smoke and the 11 of them were counting themselves in the dark, and the sky above the northern highlands was the specific shade of black that only exists after everything that was producing light has been destroyed. She remembers the cold first. Always the cold first. The Highland winter does and remains until it decides otherwise. She remembers standing in it without a coat, because the coat was inside the building that no longer existed, and thinking with the strange clarity that crisis produces that she needed to find something warm before the shock wore off, because once the shock wore off, the cold would matter in a way it currently did not. She remembers counting. 11. She counted 11 times across 3 hours because 11 felt wrong. Too small, too specific, too final, and she kept expecting the number to change. It never changed. The Ashfin flag shifts again. Kira is back in the Great Hall. Brennan is still speaking. The words of the exile declaration move around her like water around stone, present, continuous, and not quite reaching her. Her left hand is at her side, where the serving tray now hangs from loosened fingers, and she becomes aware that her fingertips are cold in the specific way. They go cold when her body is redirecting resources away from her extremities. She has not cried in 4 years. She's not going to cry now. But the wetness at the outer corner of her right eye exists independently of that decision, and she does not have a free hand to address it. So she simply allows it to be there and looks straight ahead and breathes at the rate she taught herself to breathe during the 3 months after Greymore, when breathing at any other rate produced results she could not afford. The Duskwall Alpha Sarah Vane is watching her from the delegate crowd, not with pity, with something more useful than pity. The focused attention of a woman who has spent years learning to read situations that other people have decided are already resolved. Sarah Vane became the Duskwall Alpha at 29 by being the person in every room who saw the thing everyone else had agreed not to look at. She is looking at Kira now with the expression of someone who is looking at exactly that thing. Kira does not know what Sarah Vane sees. She knows only that being seen by someone in this room who is not David Crow feels like the first solid ground she has encountered since she walked through the east archway tonight. Brennan finishes the formal declaration. He waits for the required 3 seconds of acknowledgement silence. Then he places his hand on Kira's arm. His grip is not cruel. It is simply final, the physical punctuation of a sentence that Pack Law has already written. He begins to turn her toward the south exit, and Kira allows it because she has not yet decided not to, and because the calculation she made 3 days ago included this moment, and she told herself she was ready for it. She is discovering that including a moment in a calculation and being ready for it are not the same thing. The south exit doors are 40 feet away. She counts them the way she counted survivors in the dark above Greymoor. 40 feet, 38, 36, and somewhere behind her left shoulder in the direction of the council table, she hears, or perhaps feels, the distinction is unclear, the sound of a document being picked up. She does not turn around. 34 feet, 4 years ago, Kira Vash arrived at the southern gate of Blackmoon Territory with 11 copper coins, a name that meant nothing inside these walls, and a specific kind of stillness that settles into a person after they have lost everything and survived it anyway. She did not arrive alone. She arrived as one of 11. But the 11 scattered quickly because 11 people from a dissolved pack moving together attract the kind of attention that dissolved packs cannot afford, and they had agreed in the dark above the Greymoor ruins that survival required separation. They had stood in a circle, 11 people in the Highland cold, some of them still bleeding, and they had looked at each other for a long moment without speaking because there was nothing to say that the silence in 11 different directions. Kira walked south. The Greymoor settlement had not been a large pack. 43 wolves in a Highland territory that had existed for 6 generations. Not powerful, not wealthy, but stable and self-sufficient and possessed of the specific dignity that comes from building something slowly and maintaining it carefully across generations. They had a pack house, a medical building, a school for the young wolves, 3 working farms along the northern ridge, and a council of 7 elders who made decisions by consensus rather than dominance. They had existed quietly and independently for 114 years. The Blackmoon Council dissolved them in a single administrative session that lasted less than 2 hours. The official record described a border violation, a Greymoor hunting party crossing into Blackmoon Territory without authorization. The violation was documented, verified, and used as the legal basis for a forced absorption order. Under pack law, a verified border violation by an unmated pack gave the dominant territory the right to absorb or dissolve. The Blackmoon Council chose dissolution. The Greymoor elders were given 72 hours to vacate. On the 48th hour, the pack house burned. The official record described an accidental fire originating in the kitchen. Kira had been in the pack house when it started. She had been in the archive room on the upper floor, the room that contained 6 generations of Greymoor documentation, birth records, land agreements, the original founding charter, and she had grabbed what she could carry and gone through the window and down the outer wall in the dark, and she had stood in the Highland cold watching the archive burn and understood with complete clarity that the fire was not accidental and that the timing, 48 hours into a 72-hour vacate order, was a message about what happened to records that contradicted Blackmoon Castle's service entrance 4 days later. She gave a different surname. She listed her origin as a small western settlement that no longer existed for unrelated reasons. She was assigned to the kitchen cleaning crew and given a dormitory bunk and a gray uniform, and she became invisible so completely and so quickly that within 3 months there was not a single person inside Blackmoon Castle who could have told you her full name without checking a staffing ledger. This was not accident. This was architecture. She spent 4 years inside the walls of the institution that destroyed her home, and she did not do it for revenge, and she did not do it waiting for an opportunity. She did it because Blackmoon Castle was the safest place a Greymoor survivor could be. Hidden in plain sight, anonymous inside the machinery of the most powerful pack on the continent, invisible to the people who had made her invisible. She had made one private agreement with herself on the night she arrived. If she ever found evidence of the council doing to another pack what they had done to Greymoor, if she ever held in her hands the specific kind of documentation that the archive fire had been designed to destroy, she would not look away. She had not anticipated that honoring that agreement would cost her everything she had rebuilt. She had anticipated it might. She had decided it was worth it anyway. 30 feet to the south exit. Brennan's hand is steady on her arm, and the hall is still holding its collective breath, and the Ashfin flags are motionless now, and Kira is walking at the pace of someone who has made their decision and is living inside the consequences of it, and somewhere behind her Sarah Vane steps forward out of the delegate crowd. Her voice is quiet, but it carries. I would like the record to note, Sarah Vane says to no one specifically and therefore to everyone that the Duskwall Pact formally requests a copy of whatever document was placed. The hall shifts. Brennan's grip tightens slightly on Kira's arm, and the senior council elder Aldrich Voss looks across the hall at David Crow with an expression that is asking a question Crow answers with the smallest movement of his head. No Sarah Vane's request lands in the hall like a stone dropped into still water. The ripples are immediate and visible. Heads turning, delegates exchanging glances, the particular quality of collective attention shifting from the signing table to the space between the Duskwall Alpha and the council elder, who has just been told by David Crow to answer no. Aldrich Voss clears his throat. The document in question is the personal property of the Alpha King. Voss delivers this with the smooth authority of a man who has spent 3 generations' worth of institutional practice making procedural obstruction sound like courtesy. Any request for its contents falls under royal discretion and cannot be formally logged until the Alpha King makes his position known. It is not a lie. It is something more functional than a lie, a true statement deployed to produce a false impression. Sarah Vane knows this. The slight tightening around her eyes confirms she knows this. But pack law inside another Alpha's territory requires a specific level of deference, and Voss has just placed the request inside a procedural box that Sarah Vane cannot open without Ozrath's cooperation. She looks at Ozrath's back. Everyone looks at Ozrath's back. Ozrath has not turned around. Brennan resumes walking and Kira resumes being walked, and the south exit is 28 feet away, and she is counting again because counting is the only thing her mind will do cleanly right now. Everything else is too large and too loud and too expensive to process while moving. She counts the feet. She watches the torchlight move across the stone floor in front of her. She listens to the sound of her outer edge of the council table, close enough to see the surface clearly. The annex is still there, flat, centered, placed with the deliberate precision she registered from across the hall. But she can see now what she could not see from 40 feet away. The document has been opened and refolded. The crease pattern is different from the one she made 3 days ago in the document preparation chamber when she pressed the paper flat against her thigh in the dark and worked quickly because the secretary could return at any moment. Ozrath opened it. He read it. All of it. The refold crease runs down the center of the page. The fold of someone who opened the document completely and read it in full before closing it again. Not the partial opening of someone checking a single line. The full document. Every word of every clause on every page, including the 14 pages of legitimate treaty text before the annex and the 3 pages of binding language after it. He read all of it, and he placed it back on the table, and he has not moved since. Kira passes the table. The exit is 20 feet away. She becomes aware that her breathing has changed, shortened, higher in her chest. The specific pattern that precedes the kind of emotional response she has not permitted herself in 4 years. She redirects it the way she always redirects it. Down, slower, anchored in the physical sensation of her feet on the stone floor, the weight of the tray, still hanging from her right hand, the specific temperature of the castle air against her face. She is almost at the exit. She is almost through it. She is almost gone from this hall, and from this territory, and from the 4 years of invisible survival that she built here, and from whatever was written in Ozrath's expression when he looked at her before he took the document. That expression she still cannot name, that fraction of something she has never seen on the face of her path. Not the guards, not a council member, not anyone she has seen move toward this corridor in the last several minutes. David Crow stands in front of her with his hands clasped loosely at his waist, and his silver hair catching the torchlight, and his expression carrying the specific quality of a man who is exactly where he planned to be. Brennan stops. Crow does not look at Brennan. He looks at Kira with the focused attention of someone who has been waiting for this specific moment and finds it satisfactory. Then he says her name, not her assumed name, not the Western settlement surname she gave at the service entrance 4 years ago. Her real name, Kiravesh. The pronunciation is exact, the emphasis on the second syllable of Vash the way it is spoken in the Northern Highland dialect, the way her mother spoke it, the way no one inside Blackmoon Castle has spoken it in 4 years, because no one inside Blackmoon Castle was supposed to know it. He smiles. It is the most frightening thing Kira has seen tonight, and tonight has contained King Ozrath. Crow allows the silence to exist for exactly long enough. This is a skill. Kira recognizes it the way you recognize a tool when you see it being used, not with admiration, not with fear, but with the cold clarity of understanding what it is and what it is designed to do. He is letting her hear her own name in the Highland pronunciation echoing inside her chest before he continues, because he wants her to be fully inside the shock of it when the next thing arrives. She gives him nothing. This is also a skill. Hers. For years of it. She keeps her eyes at the correct level and her breathing at the correct rate and her face at the specific neutrality she perfected in the first 6 months inside these walls when she understood that invisibility was not just about being unseen. It was about giving watchers nothing to see even when they were looking directly at you. Almost. Crow's smile adjusts. You read well, he says. Still quiet. Still unhurried. Brennan is standing 2 feet behind Kira and has not moved and will not move without instruction because Brennan is a function and Crow is currently the instruction. The document preparation chamber. 3 days ago, Secretary Pollard handed you the annex collation at approximately the 9th hour. A pause. He did not look at your face. Kira says nothing. He never looks at faces, Crow continues. I have relied on that quality of his for 11 years. It is remarkably consistent. He tilts his head slightly. What I had not relied on, what represented a genuine variable in an otherwise controlled sequence, was the possibility that the Greymoor survivor assigned to the night cleaning crew would turn out to be the specific kind of person who reads pack contract law for private study. The stone floor is very cold through the soles of Kira's shoes. She focuses on that. The specific cold of Blackmoon Castle stone at the 11th hour when the heating from the lower furnaces has not yet reached the east corridors fully. She focuses on it because what Crow is describing requires her to stay completely level, and the cold is a useful anchor. He knew, not that she would read it. He has just said that was a variable. But everything else, the assignment, Secretary Pollard, the timing, the specific document handed to a specific survivor of a specific dissolved pack on the eve of the summit that would seal that pack's fate permanently. He did not accidentally hand the annex to a Greymoor survivor. He constructed the conditions and allowed the variable and prepared for both outcomes. If she had not read it, the treaty signs, the pack's fall into servitude, Kira remains anonymous and useful. If she did read it and said nothing, same outcome, plus confirmation that the Greymoor survivors who had entered Blackmoon service had been successfully neutralized by 4 years of institutional invisibility. If she read it and acted, you have given me something more valuable than silence, Crow says. His voice carries the satisfaction of a man completing a sentence he has been composing for some time. You have given me a Greymoor survivor with documented access to the annex, a personal motive for interference that any council tribunal will find self-evident, and a pack law violation that removes you from the territory before you can be examined as a witness. He pauses. The evidence you presented becomes the grievance of a displaced Omega acting from personal injury. The treaty resumes. The annex is reclassified as tampered documentation. He looks at her with something that is almost respectful. The Alpha King has been informed of your origin and your motive. He agreed the exile should proceed. The south exit is 15 feet away. Kira looks across the hall at the back of Ozrath's head. His shoulders are still. His hands are at his sides. The annex is on the table in front of his empty chair, and he is standing 3 feet from it facing the far wall, and he has not turned around since he placed it there. She cannot tell if what Crow said is true. She cannot tell if Ozrath read the full document and made a political calculation and decided that a servant girl from a dissolved pack was an acceptable cost for keeping the summit intact. She cannot tell if the refold crease she saw was the fold of a man who read every word and understood every implication, or the fold of a man who confirmed the document was inflammatory and set it aside to be managed. She cannot tell, and Crow knows she cannot tell. He steps aside. one hand extended toward the exit in a gesture so courteous it is its own form of violence. The exile stands Kira Vash. Quietly. Finally, walk out of this hall, and I will ensure your Greymore sisters and brothers currently living in Blackmoon service are not reviewed for similar violations. Stop moving. That is a Brennan's hand returns to her arm. Kira looks at the exit. Then she looks at the back of Ozrath's head. Then she looks at the annex on the table. The quill is still in the first signatory's hand. The treaty isn't signed. And David Crow is watching her with the patience of a man who has already won and is simply waiting for the world to confirm it. Kira takes one step toward the exit. Then she stops. Not because something external stops her. Because something internal does. Something that has no name yet and does not need one. Something that exists below the level of calculation and strategy and the careful architecture of 4 years of survival decisions. It is not courage. Courage is a choice made in the presence of fear, and Kira is currently beyond fear, the way a person standing inside a fire is beyond worrying about warmth. It is simpler than courage. It is the thing that was present on the night above Greymore, when she stood in the Highland cold counting 11 people and understanding that the number would not change and decided to walk south anyway, instead of lying down in the dark and becoming the 12th thing the fire took. She has been here before. Not in this hall, not with these stakes, but inside this specific internal geography, standing at the exact boundary between the life she has and the life she chooses. She has been here before, and she knows what she does at this boundary. She turns around. Brennan's hand falls from her arm because she is moving against the direction of his grip, and he is not prepared for it. And in the half second it takes him to recalibrate, she has already taken 3 steps back into the hall, and the recalibration does not matter anymore, because what happens next happens in a register that Brennan's function does not cover. Kira walks back into the Great Hall. She walks past Brennan, past the outer edge of the council table, past the radius of empty floor she does not rush. She walks with the specific pace of someone who has made a decision so complete that urgency is no longer relevant. The destination is certain, only the arrival remains. She stops in the center of the Great Hall. 200 wolves. The signing table with its 11 territorial seals, and its waiting quill, and its unsigned pages. The Ashfin flags. The Duskwall contingent with Sarah Vane at its front, whose expression shifts the moment Kira stops walking into something that is not quite disbelief and not quite recognition, but lives in the territory between them. The torches along the walls. The fireplace behind the east archway, throwing its gold light across the stone floor in a long familiar pattern she has watched from the kitchen corridor for 4 years. David Crow has gone very still. Kira faces the back of Ozrath's head. She has thought about this moment for exactly the time it took her to walk from the exit back to the center of the hall. Approximately 11 seconds, and she has not produced a strategy or a speech or a carefully constructed legal argument. She has produced only the understanding that Crow's entire architecture depends on her leaving. That every mechanism he built, the planted document, the motivated witness narrative, the exile, the threat against the other Greymore survivors, requires her absence to function. His construction is airtight against the displaced Omega, who is no longer in the room. It has one structural vulnerability. She has to still be in the room. Pack law has one provision that supersedes the exile declaration for an unmated female. 1. It is older than the exile law itself, and it has not been invoked in living memory, because the conditions required to invoke it have not existed in living memory. It requires a direct and immediate threat to pack welfare that cannot be addressed through any other available channel. And it requires the female invoking it to speak the Alpha King's personal name, not his title, not his rank, his name, as the formal signal of invocation. Kira has one name. She has been careful not to learn it for 4 years, because learning it felt like standing too close to something that could not be safely approached. She learned it anyway, the way you learn the location of every exit in a building you plan to spend years inside. Not because you intend to use it, but because knowing it is a condition of genuine preparedness. She breathes once. The hall is completely silent. She opens her mouth. Ozrath. It leaves the room in a different way than sound normally leaves a room. It does not echo, it lands. On the stone floor, on the walls, on the 200 wolves who have stopped being an audience and become witnesses to something none of them will be able to accurately describe afterward, because the accurate description requires acknowledging that an unmated Omega cleaning staff member from a dissolved pack just invoked the ancient provision in the center of the Bloodmoon Summit in front of the entire Continental Pack leadership, using the Alpha King's name, which no unmated female has spoken aloud in 7 years. The quill stops moving. David Crow takes one step forward and then stops because something in the atmosphere of the room has changed in a way that makes forward movement feel structurally unsound. And King Ozrath, who has stood with his back to the hall for the last several minutes with the stillness of a man processing something enormous in private, turns around. Completely. His eyes find Kira in the center of the hall with the directness of someone who knew exactly where she was standing without having to search. The index is in his hand. He opened it again, and his expression, the expression of a man who has shown nothing to anyone in 7 years, who has governed an entire continent of wolves from behind a face that is something that none of the 200 wolves in this room have ever seen before, including his council, including David Crow. The expression lasts 4 seconds. Kira counts them the way she counts everything, automatically, precisely, as a mechanism for staying inside her body while something enormous moves through the room. For seconds of King Ozrath's face showing something it has not shown in 7 years, and then the surface returns. Not the cold blankness of before, but something different, something with temperature and direction, a controlled burn where there was previously only ice. He looks at the index in his hand. Then he looks at Kira. Then he looks at David Crow. The quality of that third look is different from the first two in a way that makes the wolves standing nearest to Crow take a single collective step sideways without appearing to decide to do so. It is the look of a man who has finished processing and arrived at a conclusion, and the conclusion has coordinates. Ozrath moves to the signing table. He does not sit. He stands at the head of it and places the index flat on the surface and smooths it open with one hand, slowly, deliberately, in full view of every delegate in the hall. And the gesture is not procedural. It is declarative. It is the physical equivalent of a statement made in a language that every wolf in this room speaks fluently regardless of their territory of origin. He has read it. He is showing them that he has read it. And he is showing them where he stands. The Bloodmoon Summit signing is suspended. His voice fills the hall the way his presence fills every room he enters. Not through volume, but through weight, through the specific gravity of an alpha whose authority is not performed but structural, built into the frequency of the words themselves. Effective immediately, pending a full and independent audit of all treaty annexes submitted by the Blackmoon Council Preparation Committee. 200 wolves processing simultaneously, a low collective movement of breath and body that is not quite disruption and not quite submission, but contains elements of both. Aldrich Voss rises from the council table. Alpha, the treaty timeline. Sit down, Aldrich. Voss sits down. Ozrath does not look at him. He is looking at the assembled delegates with the focused attention of a man addressing a room he is accustomed to commanding and has never once been uncertain about commanding. The Ashfin Pack and the Duskwall Pack are placed under temporary Blackmoon royal protection effective from this moment. A pause that is not uncertainty, but emphasis. Any council directive issued in the last 18 months affecting either pack's territorial status is suspended pending audit review. This includes, and here he picks up the index and holds it flat so the room can see it exists as a physical object with physical weight and physical consequences, any binding language contained in documents appended to the primary treaty text. From the delegate crowd, Sarah Vane steps forward. She moves with the deliberate visibility of someone who has decided to be seen and is making that decision count. She stops at the front of the Duskwall contingent and inclines her head toward Ozrath in the formal acknowledgement of one alpha to another, and when she speaks her voice is steady in the way that things are steady when they have been waiting a long time to be said. The Duskwall Pack formally seconds the suspension request and offers full cooperative documentation to the audit process. She pauses. We are grateful to the Alpha King for his attention to this matter. She does not look at Kira directly, but the slight turn of her chin in Kira's direction is precise enough to be intentional and visible enough to be read by everyone in the hall who is paying attention. Which is everyone,
man
the Ashfin Cormacfun who has said nothing since the ceremony stalled. Releases a breath that has clearly been held for some time and nods once with the expression of a man who came very close to something he did not see coming and is still processing the proximity of it. David Crow has not moved. He is standing at the edge of the hall near the east corridor entrance with his hands clasped at his waist, and his expression in the specific configuration that Kira now recognizes as his resting state under pressure, revealing nothing, calculating everything, waiting for the shape of the new situation to become clear enough to respond to. He has not been arrested. He has not been named publicly. Ozrath has suspended the treaty and protected the Pax and opened the audit and done all of it without once saying Crow's name aloud. Whether this is strategic restraint or insufficient evidence or something else entirely, Kira cannot determine from where she is standing. What she can determine is that Crow is still in the room, still present, still watching, still here. The guards who were escorting Kira toward the exit have stopped moving. Brennan is standing 6 feet behind her with the expression of a man whose instructions have been overtaken by events and is waiting for new ones. The exile declaration that was in the process of being enacted has no procedural status in a hall where the Alpha King has just invoked summit suspension. The legal machinery that was carrying Kira toward the door has simply stopped. She is not free. She is in the specific legal state that exists when an enforcement action is interrupted by a higher authority before completion. Not reversed, not confirmed, suspended in the same procedural limbo as the treaty itself. She has no status. She has no protection. She has no clarity about what happens next. What she has is the knowledge that the annex is open on the signing table in front of 200 witnesses, and that David Crow is walking calmly toward the east corridor. Nobody stops him. Nobody has been told to stop him. He reaches the corridor entrance. The torchlight from the hall catches his silver hair one final time. He does not look back at the hall. He does not look back at Ozrath or Voss or Sarah Vane or the suspended treaty. He looks back at Kira. One look, 3 seconds. Then he steps into the east corridor, and the darkness beyond the torchlight takes him, and he is gone. And somewhere in the architecture of Blackmoon Castle behind the east wall, in a passage that does not appear on any official plan, in a part of the building that the cleaning staff has never been assigned to because the cleaning staff has never been told it exists, a door opens and closes in the dark. The hall takes a long time to empty. Summits do not dissolve quickly. They dissolve through the gradual accumulation of small departures. Delegate groups conferring in tight clusters before moving toward exits. Pack alphas exchanging the kind of looks that contain entire conversations. Castle staff reappearing at the edges of the room with the careful timing of people who have learned to read the exact moment a crisis transitions from active to aftermath. Kira stands in the center of it and does not move. Not because she is waiting for something specific, because moving requires a destination and she does not currently have one. The kitchen dormitory is behind a door she no longer has legal access to. The service corridors that have been her architecture for 4 years exist inside a territory whose exile declaration against her is suspended but not rescinded. She is standing in the precise center of a hall that is emptying around her, and she is, in the most literal sense available, nowhere. Sarah Vane passes close to her on the way out. She does not stop, but her hand, briefly, precisely, with the specific pressure of intention rather than accident, 3 seconds touches Kira's arm. Then she's gone through the north exit with the dusk wall contingent moving behind her, and Kira looks at the place on her arm where the contact was and understands that it was not comfort. It was acknowledgement. The distinction matters more than she can currently explain. The hall is nearly empty when she becomes aware that the quality of the remaining silence has changed. There is a difference between the silence of a room that is emptying and the silence of a room that has emptied, and the silence of a room in which 2 people remain and both of them know it. She has crossed from the second into the third without registering the exact moment of transition. She does not turn around. She hears him anyway, not footsteps. Ozrath moves without announcing himself. But the atmospheric shift that she has now felt twice tonight and has no framework for except that her body registers it before her mind does, that pull in the base of her spine that has no logical source and does not require one. He stops beside her, not in front of her, beside her, shoulder distance, looking at the same empty hall she is looking at. The extinguishing torches, the abandoned territorial place settings, the signing table with its unsigned pages, and the open index still flat across the surface where he left it. He does not speak immediately. Neither does she. The silence between them has a different texture from the silence of the past several hours. That silence was loaded, full of threat and calculation and the specific pressure of things that needed to be said before irreversible things happened. This silence is something else. It is the silence of two people standing inside the aftermath of something enormous and finding that the aftermath does not require immediate narration. Kira looks at the signing table. Ozrath looks at it too. When he speaks, his voice is low, not the commanding register of the summit hall, not the weighted authority, but the register underneath that, the one that exists when the function is set aside and what remains is simply a man saying words to a person standing next to him. How long? It is not quite a question. It lands as a question anyway. For years, Kira says. Her voice is steadier than she expects. Kitchen cleaning crew. Night shift. A pause. North dormitory. Yes. He is quiet for a moment. She can see in her peripheral vision that he is looking at the table still, at the annex, at the quill lying beside the unsigned pages, at the 11 territorial seals that have been waiting all evening to mean something permanent and have instead become evidence. The Greymore dissolution, he says. The council directive. Yes, I did not authorize it. She has been waiting, without knowing she was waiting, for this specific sentence for 4 years. She has imagined hearing it in various forms, in various contexts. In the private architecture of the thoughts, she allowed herself in the dark of the dormitory when the castle was quiet, and the distance between what had happened and what should have happened felt most acute. She had imagined it would feel like resolution. It feels like something more complicated than resolution. It feels like a door opening into a room she does not yet have a map for. I know, she says. He turns to look at her then, fully, the way he looked at her when he took the annex from the tray, with the complete attention of someone who is not managing an interaction but genuinely inside one. Up close, the oldest scar along his jaw is more visible than it was in the torchlight of the full hall. The one that curves beneath his chin and disappears into his collar. The one that belongs to a 16-year-old boy who survived something that was designed not to be survived. She looks at it because looking at it is easier than looking at his eyes. There are 11 survivor names in the Greymore dissolution 3 years ago when I began the council audit. 10 names are accounted for. A pause. One is not. Kira looks at the scar. The documentation listed her as deceased. Ozrath continues. Unverified. No body. No witness confirmation. Just an absence where a name should be. His voice has the quality of someone who has said the next words before. Not aloud, but in the repeated internal version of a conversation you have been waiting to have. I concluded she was either dead or had chosen to remain unfindable. I decided to respect both possibilities. He looks at her directly. I did not consider a third possibility. The last torch on the west wall gutters and dims, and the hall settles into the lower light of the fireplace embers and the cold blue of the Highland night coming through the high windows, and in this light, Kira finally looks up at him properly, at the winter storm eyes that are not cold right now, that contain something she has no prior reference point for, something that has clearly not been visible in them for a very long time. She does not speak. He does not look away. Your exile declaration is suspended pending audit completion. The formal language, but the voice it arrives in is not formal. You are not free to leave the territory during the audit period. You are not required to return to the kitchen dormitory. A pause. Your status inside Blackmoon Castle is currently, he considers the precise word for a moment, undetermined. Undetermined, Kira repeats. Yes, something in her chest that has been locked for 4 years. Not broken, not absent, simply locked with the specific mechanism of someone who closed it deliberately and kept the key because throwing it away felt like a different kind of defeat. Shifts, not opens. Shifts. The distinction is important. She is not naive enough to call it open, but it moved. Ozrath turns to leave. He takes 3 steps toward the north corridor and then stops something in the air that did not belong. That precise, arrested stillness of a wolf who has received information that requires acknowledgement before movement can continue. He does not turn back to face her. My wolf, he says quietly, to the middle distance of the corridor ahead of him, has been silent for 7 years. A pause. It has not stopped moving since you placed that document on the tray. He does not explain what that means. He walks into the north corridor, and the dark takes him the way the dark took Crow an hour ago. Completely, immediately, without remainder. But is not the same dark. Kira stands alone in the ember light of the emptied hall with her hands at her sides, and the unsigned treaty on the table behind her, and the knowledge that David Crow is somewhere inside the walls of this castle in a passage that does not appear on any official plan. She thinks about what Crow said. She thinks about the Greymoor survivors currently living in Blackmoon service.